in introducing two friends of mine, Michael Lam and David Finance. Michael and David share with me a deep philosophical similarity with respect to our motivation. Now, our methods of approaching that philosophy is very different in all three of our cases. But I know, and I'm sure there's going to be no dispute, that we all three seek to show Guyana at its finest. Our interpretations are different. And this, I believe, is what will make this afternoon special. Michael and I have been photographers together for as long as we've been doing this. And even prior to us starting with photography, the Finance name has been known to us. First, Bobby Finance, and now David Finance. But it is a pet peeve of mine that very few of the photographers that I know approach photography with more than a desire to present a pretty photo. Michael's presentation this afternoon is a small part of a body of work, which is coherent and which forms a portfolio. The portfolio says something. The portfolio has a coherent message. And that message is best described to you by Michael, to be honest, but it does go to something that is dear to me as well, which I have presented in different form, and that is a view of coastal Guyana, a view of the seascapes of Guyana. I think that you will enjoy it, and without further ado, may I present Mr. Michael Lam.
Thank you. I am really nervous, so excuse me. I don't know what he was talking about. These are just photos. So, first of all, good evening. Do any of you know an Arawak dialect? Anyone? No? Okay, good. Because I have no idea how to pronounce the title of my presentation today. The name was given to me through social media, and I know it means water in Arawak dialect. I pronounce it Oniabo. And I chose it because, like Nicholas said, all these are pertaining to the sea, the seawall, seascapes in general. Right? So, start with the first one. This is the seawall. Known to most Guyanese, since most of us live on the coast. For any of us who have given any thought to how spending time on the seawall makes us feel, you know that for each of us it varies, and for all of us it is the same. It is the same in that it affects us somehow, always does. And it varies for each of us, not only in how it affects us, but in how many ways it can affect us. I look at this photo and I think you feel the wall beneath your feet, the wind across your shoulders, the warmth of the afternoon sun upon your face. Hear the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the call of the birds upon the breeze. Upon this wall and beyond is a far different world than inland, at least for a little while you're on it. Excellent. Oniabo is actually a collection of, started off with 6 seascapes that I printed as gallery wraps. I have them at my office. Some of them are a part of this presentation, to which I lent the name and expanded upon it. Originally, I intended to call this one White Cap, to reflect the white cap waves rushing to the shore, the white cap clouds upon the horizon, and the white cap rocks sitting in the blazing sun. A combination of all of these elements along with the vanishing point that they create, drew me into this photo. It may very well affect each of you differently. To many, the seawall is a construct. And when I refer to the seawall, I include the seashore. The wall is always there, the rocks are always there, there's always sand and shells, and the water of the ocean or the sea is always there. To me, it is ever changing, especially the seashore itself. Banks of sands are built and broken down by the waves, and the terrain changes all the time. This was a section near Kitty. The lines of the sand banks were complemented by the clouds. The midday sun was pouring its way through the clouds, the lighter portions, and the dark portions were casting shadows upon the water. I stood there, looked through the viewfinder of the camera, and felt motion, even though it was a very still day. And that is what I tried to capture in this one. Next. This is at Lusignan. It's a frequent haunt of mine because some of my extended family lives in a village nearby. A few of the images in this presentation come from there because, well, I visited so frequently. I actually ran to get into position to take this photo because I was afraid it would change. And it was because of the symmetry created by the boats and by the sky. And when I saw the fisherman tending to the mooring, I knew that I had to get it at that point as well. He was probably oblivious to anything but his work. But for me, I felt inspired by the vastness of the sky and the ocean and the work of these men and their boats, the daily routine that can at moments like this produce so much beauty. In 2012, there was some talk about a wolf moon in the papers. So I think as many photographers as possible went out to try and get a photo of the wolf moon. Mother Nature had other plans for me. The winds and the clouds had conspired to deny me that planned photo that I had of the moon just clearing the treetops. Instead of giving up and just returning home, I waited a bit more. And when it crested a cloud and shone upon the shores, I used the light available to capture the scene that was just before me. And the unscripted image was far more pleasing than the one that I had planned and hoped for. I can still feel the excitement that gripped me as I had abandoned my comfortable perch and skipped from rock to rock to get to this particular vantage point. I seldom plan photos because they just don't work out, as was in this case. But seizing the opportunity of an unplanned moment is something harder to learn because you tend to give up. The patience in seeing what is there and not what you want to be there can make the difference between a nice photo and a great photo. For my landscape type photographs, I love to use wide angle lens. This photo is a good example of why. You can get close to a subject and still encompass more of what is there. This is an old rusted and barnacled steel sheet that sits in a perpetual pool of water. Even at low tide, there's usually water around it. And I find it serene and contemplative most times when I visit there. I can face the wind and clear my mind, let everything wash away, and be free of everything that burdens me just for a little while. I actually stood there for many minutes after taking this, just staring out past the sheet of metal towards the horizon. And when I look back at this photo, I feel that again each time. Just past that same old sheet of iron, the seawall veers, as you can see there. What reached within me to compel me to take this photo is still a question for me. But they say hindsight is 20/20. I can tell you that it's the sky, the way the clouds complemented the wall and the shore. You know, I can tell you that it's the sunlight's glare. I can tell you a lot of things. But for me at that time, the composition just felt right. And a year later, still feels right to me. Whether it's fate or serendipity, I can't say. And it might be just my luck. But it is with some amount of frequency that the clouds in the sky will complement and even mirror what lies beneath it. I'm just glad that I'm there when it happens. As many a friend have pointed out to me for this particular photograph, the only thing missing is a mermaid upon the rock. But I think to myself that if there were a mermaid upon the rock, I would probably have composed this a lot differently. You will not have this photo that you see here today. I've also been told that I have a thing for photos with jandy flags. I take a lot of photos along the seashore, and like the sand and the sea, there's usually always a jandy flag somewhere. Somewhere in the distance, somewhere close by, maybe discarded near the walls. But there's usually one somewhere. This photo is actually used as a tool to demonstrate my choice of black and white as opposed to color when I process my photographs. There's a color version of this, well, not this exact one, a different composition somewhere. For me, the texture in the lower part of the photo brings back memories of the sand, like sand between your toes. And the puffy clouds bring back that sense of motion, the wind blowing. This does it for me now, just as when I took it. David? This one I call The Lonely Sea. I never really thought of doing seascapes before, or using something like a seascape as the sole subject in a photograph or a photographic body of work. Maybe because, like most coastal dwellers, I took the seawall, the seashore, and the sea for granted. After I had shown Hiroshi Sugimoto's seascape collection online, sadly not in person, I was inspired to convey my own take on the sea that lures me so regularly to its shores. While Sugimoto offers long exposures, I've so far only done what I consider normal exposures. But the sense of aloneness in this one, and in the one that I felt in Sugimoto's work, is what makes me compare it. Two photographers other than myself played a large part in this photograph, though neither were physically there. Uncle Bobby Fernandez has been a large inspiration for me. Although our photos differ widely, he saw some of my work, and I believe he sensed one of the directions I was heading in. And he gave me a book by Ansel Adams, another photographer whom I've long admired. And he told me that what was in that book was more along what I liked than what he liked. This photo I planned. It's one of the few planned ones that worked out for me. I timed the tide, I went out, again this is what I went out and sat there. I sat there for probably about 45 minutes. Every so often I'd take a few photographs just to remind the birds that I'm alive. And I sat and waited for the right moment, when the light was right, and I took this one. Often, I only process the photos that I need for my yearly photography project, which I call the deck. I processed this photo 1 year after I took it. I seem to have made a bit of a habit of that recently, actually. It's just that I didn't see what was there until I went back after some time had passed to process it. And it all just fell into place. It took time for me to realize what I had and what it could offer. One person described it as horse racing on the moon. I think I can see that. But the scientist in me keeps yelling something about gravity. Next. There's so much that can be said about this photo and so much that probably shouldn't be said. I think to my time sitting on the seawall, whether alone or with family or with friends, it matters not if there's conversation. There's a sense of well-being that I experience out there. Just sitting there and looking at everything, looking at nothing. What interested me firstly for this scene was the three layers that I saw. The foreground, the midground, and then the sky and the horizon in the background. The fact that there was a couple sitting there was kind of like the icing on the cake for me. Thanks. This is the only photo in the collection that I'm not really sure if I'm on the seacoast or on the riverbank. This was a beach I came across while wandering around Puerto Rico. And as you can see, my thing for Jandy flags was quite satisfied in this one. There was one of those situations where the lens you had to be the lens that would work for the photograph. I really wanted to change the lens at one point, but the wind that was blowing on this beach and the sand that was kicking up was too much for the camera, way too much. Okay. This is one of the most recent ones. I titled it Born of Air and Water. I went back to the Japanese photographer again, Hiroshi Sugimoto. In introducing his seascape collection, he said, and I quote, "Water and air. So very commonplace are these substances, they hardly attract attention, and yet they vouchsafe our very existence." End quote. I have included earth as well in many of my own compositions, but the mistiness caused by the murky water, the clouds emerging from a hazy distant sky, and the muddy formations reaching tendril-like from the ocean floor to the seashore reminded me of his words. My daughter was actually pointing out the scene directly in front for me to take as a photograph. And I was demonstrating to her how if I took it at a slight angle, I can get a better composition. And this was what resulted. This is the final one. It's a reminder that as beautiful as the sea is, it is also a rough and merciless beast. In the shadow of death's passage, may we find beauty. At the end of a beautiful life, the reaper always stands. Many may differ with me on the merits of this photograph. To me, it is beautiful. If it affected you in any way whatsoever, then for me, it's a good photograph. Thank you.